Germany's defense minister has put forth a plan for the future of northern Syria. Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer's plan calls for an internationally patrolled security zone in Syria along the border with Turkey. That's similar to what Turkey says it wants to achieve with its own incursion there. The difference is that the zone proposed by the German defense minister would be under international and not Turkish control. Kramp-Karrenbauer is seen as a possible successor to Chancellor Merkel, and she says she's discussed her proposal with Merkel and put it to Germany's Western allies. Here's part of what the defense minister had to say in an exclusive interview with DW.
My recommendation is that we establish an internationally controlled security zone in cooperation with Turkey and Russia. This security zone would seek to resume the fight against terror and against ISIS, which currently has come to a standstill. It would also ensure that we stabilize the region so that rebuilding civilian life is once again possible, and so that those who have fled can also return voluntarily.
Well, let's bring in DW's chief political editor, Michaela Kutner, who conducted that interview with the German defense minister. Good to see you, Michaela. So tell us more about what Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer is hoping to achieve with this move.
Well, she's clearly trying to change the game, the power game that's currently going on in northern Syria. The Turkish President Erdogan is due to meet the Russian President Putin today, and certainly they will be listening very closely to what essentially is a counter-proposal to who will dominate and who will control northern Syria. It could potentially be the Europeans stepping up to the brink, no longer being on the sidelines. The big question is how exactly this will look like in detail, and whether the other allies she's due to meet at the end of this week at a NATO defense ministers meeting will go for this proposal. And the main core issue, of course, is will Turkey eventually come round to wanting to be on board now that it's so close to Russia?
OK, so would this internationally administered zone that the German defense minister is proposing, would it involve both the European Union and Russia? Because it's hard to imagine Russia not being part of that picture.
Well, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer says it would have to involve everybody. There's no way around Russia in that region. In Syria, there can be no solution without Russia. Also, it would have to involve the Turks. But what does involve mean? I asked her quite clearly whether this could potentially mean also German troops on the ground, a German military involvement. And here's what she had to say.
The question of how Germany handles this politically, and more than anything, what that means for our armed forces, is a question that must be decided by the Bundestag.
Well, presumably the German defense minister would not put forth such a proposal without assuming herself that German troops could be committed to that. But is it clear that the German parliament would support that move?
Absolutely not. So I pretty much got the standard German politician's answer. It's a parliamentary army. Any kind of move the German forces do outside of Germany needs a clear mandate from the German Bundestag. And Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer's own party, Angela Merkel's CDU, is currently in the so-called Grand Coalition with the Social Democrats. And we already heard this morning a lot of sceptical voices here. This is a proposal that has been put on the table without consultation with the Social Democrats. In fact, she sat with them the evening before and clearly didn't mention this. So I think we're ahead for quite a heated debate here in Germany.
Yeah, she's putting the pressure on her colleagues there. So first, Germany suspends weapons exports to Turkey. Then Merkel tells President Erdogan to halt his military offensive in Syria. Now the German defense minister is calling for an internationally controlled security zone in northeastern Syria. It sounds like Germany is becoming more assertive with its foreign policy.
Well, certainly Germany's defense minister, and this is the interesting aspect here, looking ahead into what is essentially no longer such a stable government that is reassessing whether it actually wants to stay in this coalition just a couple of weeks from now. And clearly, she wasn't just speaking as a defense minister. Let's have a listen what she said.
This is first of all a proposal that I'm making as party leader and as defense minister. I know it is a proposal that is supported by many defense and foreign policy experts in my party. Before going public with this recommendation, I informed the Chancellor. This will definitely be discussed within the government, but we can't simply talk about Europe needing to be more than a bystander. We must come up with our own proposals to catalyse discussion.
We must come up with our own proposals, and this is quite a significant international proposal, and it's being put forth by the German defense minister, not by Chancellor Merkel. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, it's a paradigm shift in how Germany perceives its own security policy, and it is much more assertive than anything Angela Merkel has put forward in her time as Chancellor in terms of defence and security in Europe and beyond. So this clearly is an attempt by Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who many see as a potential successor to Angela Merkel, an attempt to step out of Merkel's shadow, and it will have a price to pay, potentially both within her own party and the so-called Grand Coalition. So she is getting ready to prove to everybody, both her own party, who's attacked her recently, but also the public, where she's suffering in the public opinion polls, that she can do German Chancellor as well.
What about reaction to this proposal, Michaela? Have Germany's European partners responded yet? Have we heard from Russia?
I think we will hear from Russia during the course of the day as Putin meets the Turkish President Erdogan. From within the Social Democrats, there's a very subdued kind of reaction for now. It will be very interesting to see what the German foreign minister has to say, who, according to Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, was informed through an SMS text message. So it will be very interesting to see what quotes we get there.
Our chief political editor, Michaela Kutner, thank you very much. And you can watch Michaela's full interview with the German defense minister today here on DW News at 10:45 UTC. Now, Kurdish-led forces are leaving towns in northern Syria, apparently in line with the terms of a deal struck between the U.S. and Turkey as part of Ankara's plans to establish and control a so-called safe zone of its own in the region, as we were just discussing there. It's demanding that Kurdish forces completely withdraw. Well, the U.S. and the Kurds once fought together in northern Syria, and now the Kurds feel a deep sense of betrayal.
Kurdish residents hurl abuse and potatoes at their one-time allies. They say they're being left for dead. Traffic in the border town of Kamishli was brought to a standstill as US troops passed through, heading to Iraq, leaving anger and betrayal in their wake.
All baby small inside the Kurdish die. No somebody talk in the Erdogan. What about the people? What about you? Hey, watch out. If you go inside the country, 20 people, all small baby small, all Kurdish die inside.
It was a different reception over the border. Armoured vehicles bearing the stars and stripes have begun arriving there. They'll be deployed to counter a resurgence of the so-called Islamic State. But claims that the US have abandoned the Kurds to a Turkish offensive still persist.
You have to go back to what our mission was. Our mission was to work by, with, and through the SDF to defeat ISIS. We believe we defeated the physical caliphate of the ISIS in March. But nowhere in there was that we would fight a long-standing NATO ally and in defense of the Kurds to enable the establishment of an autonomous Kurdish state.
Now Kurdish forces are on a race to get out of northern Syria ahead of a ceasefire deadline. Ambulances and vans were seen leaving Ras Al Ain, a town encircled by Turkish troops. Speaking in Istanbul, their president hinted at a continuation of the offensive once the truce ends on Tuesday night.
We have a trip to Sochi, Russia on Tuesday. In this meeting, we will take up this process with Mr. Putin, and after that, God willing, we will take the necessary steps.
And further signs that Moscow is looking to fill the void left by the US. Russian trucks filmed in another 2 Syrian towns on Sunday.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to foreign policy analyst Michael Friedson. I asked him what we can expect from that upcoming meeting in Sochi later today between Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
we can expect really not to be given too much overt information. I think that what's going to happen is the safe zone that Erdogan is so insistent upon is going to come in some form. He's going to enlist Putin because Putin is the Syria representative, and Syria, of course, has to be a part of this mix. All of the other interesting ideas that are being put forward, for instance, the Russians, Putin is talking about humanitarian concerns and stressing the fact that Erdogan has a shaky record and anything that happens has to be of the utmost with humanitarian concerns, and that's something that's not usually associated with Putin. So there's a lot of new territory to blaze here.